The dust from the wagon wheels had barely settled when Abigail Winter spotted the stranger leaning against the post outside Miller's general store. Something about the tall cowboy with eyes, the color of storm clouds, made her clutch her daughter's hand a little tighter. Widow for 5 years now, Abigail had learned to be wary of drifters passing through Silver Creek, especially those who took notice of her or her daughter. "Mama, why are you squeezing so hard?" 8-year-old Alice asked, her solemn face turned upward. Abigail relaxed her grip. "Sorry, sweetheart. Let's get what we need and head back to the boarding house before the afternoon rain." It was 1878, and Silver Creek, Colorado had grown from a mining outpost to a proper town with 3 saloons, a church, and enough businesses to serve the ranchers and miners who called the surrounding area home. Abigail had built a respectable life here since her husband's passing, running a small but tidy boarding house on the edge of town. It wasn't the life she'd dreamed of as a girl in Pennsylvania, but it kept a roof over their heads and food on the table. The stranger's eyes followed them as they climbed the steps to the wooden sidewalk. He straightened, revealing his considerable height, and tipped his hat politely. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice carrying a gentle timbre that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance. Abigail nodded curtly and guided Alice through the door. She'd learned long ago that politeness could be afforded to strangers, but trust was a luxury she couldn't spare. Inside the store, Mr. Miller greeted them warmly. "Mrs. Winter and little Miss Alice, what can I help you with today?" "Just the usual supplies, Mr. Miller, and perhaps some peppermint sticks if you have them." Abigail glanced at Alice, whose expression remained as serious as ever. The child rarely smiled, not since her father died, and certainly never at any of the men who passed through town or tried to engage her. Some folks whispered it wasn't natural for a child to be so solemn, but Abigail knew her daughter's heart carried heavy memories for one so young. As Mr. Miller gathered their supplies, the bell above the door jingled. The cowboy from outside stepped in, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. Up close, Abigail could see he was older than she first thought, perhaps in his mid-30s, with lines etched around his eyes that spoke of both hardship and laughter. "Afternoon, sir," Mr. Miller called out. "What can I do for you?" "Looking for work, mainly," the stranger replied. "Name's Finn Blackwood. Just rode in from Wyoming Territory." Mr. Miller scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Well now, the Pearson Ranch might be hiring hands for the season. Old man Pearson lost 2 men last month, one to marriage and one to California gold fever." Finn nodded. "Much obliged for the information. I'll head out there tomorrow." His gaze drifted to where Alice stood examining a colorful tin of hard candies, her small face pinched in concentration. "That's a mighty serious expression for someone looking at sweets," he observed, crouching down to Alice's level but maintaining a respectful distance. "When I was your age, just the thought of candy had me grinning ear to ear." Alice regarded him with the same guarded expression she offered all strangers, especially men. Her small mouth remained set in a straight line, her eyes wary. Finn didn't seem deterred by her lack of response. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden figure, a perfectly carved horse with flowing mane and tail. "Made this on the trail," he explained, setting it on the counter near Alice. "Helps pass the time when the stars are too bright for sleeping." "Not sure what to do with it, though. Seems like it needs someone who appreciates fine horses." Alice's eyes widened slightly, but her expression remained unchanged. Abigail stepped closer, ready to end the interaction, when Finn straightened and looked directly at Alice. "You know what?" he said softly. "I think I'd like to see you smile someday, little miss. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. I'll earn that smile every day if I have to." Something in his words, spoken with such gentle sincerity, made Abigail pause. There was no presumption in his manner, no expectation, just a simple, honest statement. "We need to be going," Abigail said, gathering their purchases. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." As they left the store, Alice reached back and took the wooden horse, slipping it into her pocket without a word. Finn didn't comment, just nodded as they passed, as if some unspoken agreement had been reached. Abigail should have been annoyed at his forwardness, but something about the interaction left her feeling unsettled in a way she couldn't quite define. It wasn't fear or anger emotions she'd grown accustomed to when men showed interest in her or her daughter. This was something different, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. The next morning, Abigail was kneading dough for the day's bread when Mrs. Hawkins, one of her boarders, bustled into the kitchen. "That new fellow in town got hired at the Pearson place," the older woman announced, helping herself to coffee. "Rode out yesterday afternoon and apparently impressed the old man enough to be hired on the spot. Good with horses, they say." Abigail nodded, not particularly interested in town gossip. Running a boarding house meant hearing all manner of news whether she wanted to or not. "Handsome man, too," Mrs. Hawkins continued, eyeing Abigail over the rim of her cup. "Not as young as some, but solid, respectable looking. Mrs. Hawkins, are you by chance attempting to play matchmaker again?" Abigail asked, more amused than annoyed. The widow had tried to pair Abigail with various men over the years, never discouraged by her lack of success. "A woman and her child need protection in these parts," Mrs. Hawkins sniffed. "Been 5 years since Robert passed, God rest his soul. Alice needs a father figure." "Alice and I are managing just fine," Abigail replied firmly, as she always did. "Now, will you be joining us for supper tonight, or are you dining with your sister?" The subject was dropped, but Abigail found her thoughts drifting to Finn Blackwood throughout the day. There had been something in his manner, a quiet steadiness, perhaps, that distinguished him from other drifters who passed through town. 2 weeks passed before Abigail saw Finn again. She was returning from delivering fresh linens to the hotel when she spotted him leading a magnificent chestnut horse down the main street. Alice, who had been walking beside her, stopped suddenly. "That's the man who gave me the wooden horse," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, it is," Abigail replied, surprised that Alice had mentioned him. Her daughter rarely commented on the people they encountered in town. Finn noticed them and led the horse over, stopping a respectful distance away. "Mrs. Winter, Miss Alice," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "Fine day, isn't it?" "Indeed," Abigail replied, noting that his clothes, while still worn, were cleaner than when they'd first met. Working at the Pearson ranch seemed to be agreeing with him. "This is Ember," Finn said, patting the horse's neck. "Mr. Pearson's prized mare. Taking her to the blacksmith for new shoes." Alice stared at the horse with undisguised interest. Unlike her reaction to people, Alice had always loved animals, especially horses. "Would you like to pet her?" Finn asked, addressing Alice directly. "She's gentle as can be." Alice looked up at her mother questioningly. Abigail hesitated, then nodded. "If Mr. Blackwood says it's all right." Carefully, Alice approached and reached out a small hand to stroke the horse's velvety nose. The mare nickered softly, and for a brief moment, Alice's expression softened, though she still didn't smile. "She likes you," Finn observed. "Horses know good souls when they meet them." Alice continued petting the horse, her movements becoming more confident. Finn watched her with a gentle expression that contained no hint of impatience or condescension, just quiet appreciation for the child's careful interaction with the animal. "Mr. Pearson mentioned you run the boarding house at the edge of town," Finn said to Abigail. Said you serve the best meals in Silver Creek. Mr. Pearson exaggerates, Abigail replied, though she was secretly pleased by the compliment. But yes, I provide meals for my boarders and sometimes for travelers passing through. I might have to verify his claim someday, Finn said with a small smile. If you accept outside guests for meals. Before Abigail could respond, the town's deputy, Frank Howard, approached. Blackwood, he nodded. Mrs. Winter. Deputy, Finn acknowledged, settling in at Pearson's all right. The lawman asked, his tone casual but his eyes watchful. Yes, sir. No complaints. The deputy turned to Abigail. Just making sure everything's all right here, Mrs. Winter. Perfectly fine, thank you, Deputy Howard, Abigail replied, recognizing the man's protective intent. Frank had been a friend of her late husband and had appointed himself her unofficial guardian over the years. After the deputy moved on, Finn cleared his throat. I should get Ember to the blacksmith. Good day to you both. As he led the horse away, Alice looked up at her mother. He seems nice, she said simply. It was the closest thing to approval Alice had expressed about any man since her father died, and Abigail wasn't quite sure how to respond. Saturday brought the monthly town social, an event Abigail usually avoided. But Alice's teacher, Miss Taylor, had gently suggested that the girl needed more interaction with other children, so Abigail had reluctantly agreed to attend. The town hall was decorated with paper streamers and wildflowers, and nearly everyone from Silver Creek and the surrounding area had turned out. A small band played lively tunes while children chased each other around the edges of the room, and adults gossiped over punch and cookies. Abigail found a quiet corner where she could observe Alice, who sat stiffly beside two other girls her age. They were chattering excitedly, while Alice listened with her usual serious expression. Not much for these gatherings either, I take it? A familiar voice asked. Abigail turned to find Finn standing beside her, looking somewhat uncomfortable in a clean shirt and vest that had seen better days but had clearly been pressed for the occasion. Alice's teacher thought it would be good for her, Abigail explained. I'm not one for crowds myself. Finn nodded understandingly. Same here. Prefer open spaces and fewer people, but Mr. Pearson insisted all his hands make an appearance, something about community standing. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as one of the girls finally coaxed Alice into joining a circle game. Alice followed along with the movements, her face serious even as the other children laughed and giggled. She's a thoughtful child, Finn observed. She is, Abigail agreed, surprised by his perceptiveness. Most people called Alice sullen or withdrawn, not thoughtful. Reminds me of my sister when we were young, Finn continued. After our mother died, Katie went almost a year without smiling, felt everything so deeply that one. The personal revelation caught Abigail off guard. I'm sorry about your mother. Alice was very close to her father. When he died, something in her just closed up. Finn nodded. Grief does that, especially to children. They don't have the words for it, so they hold it in their expressions instead. The insight struck Abigail deeply. She'd never thought of it quite that way before. May I ask what happened to your husband? Finn asked carefully. Mining accident, Abigail replied, the words familiar from years of repeating them. Tunnel collapse. Robert was helping extract men who were trapped when a second collapse occurred. He died saving others, Finn said softly. That's a legacy to be proud of. It is, Abigail agreed. But it doesn't make his absence any easier to bear, especially for Alice. The band struck up a livelier tune, and several couples moved to the center of the room to dance. Would it be terribly forward of me to ask you for a dance, Mrs. Winter? Finn asked, surprising her. Abigail hesitated. She hadn't danced since before Robert died. I'm not sure, just one dance, Finn said. Then I promise to return you to your quiet corner. Something in his gentle humor made Abigail smile despite herself. One dance, she agreed. As they joined the other dancers, Abigail was acutely aware of the eyes following them. A widow dancing with a newcomer would certainly give the town gossip something to discuss. Finn proved to be a capable dancer, guiding her with confidence, but without presumption. His hand at her waist was respectful, his steps measured to accommodate her rustiness. "You're quite good at this," Abigail observed. "My mother insisted all her children learn properly," Finn explained. "Said it was a civilized skill that would serve us well, no matter where life took us." "She was right," Abigail said. "Where did life take you, Mr. Blackwood, before Silver Creek?" A shadow crossed his face briefly. "Many places. Wyoming most recently. Before that, Kansas, Texas, Montana territory. A true wanderer then." "I've moved around," he acknowledged. "Looking for something, I suppose, though I couldn't always tell you what." The honesty in his answer was refreshing. Most men would have spun tales of adventure or opportunity, not admitted to an undefined search. As the dance ended, Abigail noticed Alice watching them intently from the sidelines, her expression unreadable. "I should check on my daughter," Abigail said. "Of course." Finn escorted her back to the edge of the room. "Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Winter." As Abigail made her way to Alice, she was intercepted by Mrs. Hawkins, whose eyes gleamed with interest. "Well now," the older woman said, "isn't that interesting?" "It was just a dance, Mrs. Hawkins," Abigail replied firmly. "If you say so, dear." The widow's knowing smile was insufferable. "But I saw the way he looked at you and the way you didn't mind it one bit." Before Abigail could formulate a suitable response, Alice appeared at her side. "Can we go home now, Mama?" she asked quietly. "Of course, sweetheart," Abigail replied, grateful for the interruption. "Let's say our goodbyes." As they were leaving, Finn approached them once more. "Mrs. Winter, Miss Alice," he said, nodding to each of them. "I was wondering if I might call on you tomorrow afternoon. Mr. Pearson's given us the day off, and I thought perhaps Alice might like to see some of Ember's new tricks." Abigail hesitated, caught between caution and the undeniable interest she felt in this unusual man. Before she could answer, Alice spoke up. "Could we, Mama?" she asked, with more animation than she'd shown all evening. Surprised by her daughter's response, Abigail found herself nodding. "That would be fine, Mr. Blackwood. Say around 2 o'clock. I'll be there," he promised, his smile reaching his eyes. "Sleep well, both of you." As they walked home under the star-filled sky, Alice clutched Abigail's hand. "Mama," she asked suddenly, "do you like Mr. Blackwood?" The question caught Abigail by surprise. "He seems like a kind man," she answered carefully. Alice nodded, apparently satisfied with this response. "I like his horse," she said after a moment. Abigail squeezed her daughter's hand. "Yes, Ember is beautiful, isn't she? And he made me a wooden horse," Alice continued. "I named her Star because of the little mark on her forehead." It was the most Alice had spoken about any single topic in months, and Abigail felt a flutter of something like hope in her chest. Perhaps Miss Taylor had been right about Alice needing more interactions, though Abigail hadn't expected a solitary cowboy to be the catalyst. The next day dawned clear and warm, a perfect late spring afternoon. Abigail found herself taking extra care with her appearance, pinning her chestnut hair in a simple but flattering style, and choosing a blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. She told herself it was merely proper to look presentable for a guest, but Mrs. Hawkins' knowing glance at breakfast suggested the older woman wasn't fooled. At precisely 2 o'clock, Finn arrived at the boarding house, leading Ember and another, smaller horse, a dappled gray mare with gentle eyes. "This is Willow," Finn explained as Alice approached cautiously. "Mr. Pearson thought you might like to meet her. She's Ember's daughter and the gentlest horse on the ranch." Alice's eyes widened. "Can I pet her?" "Of course," Finn said, guiding the girl's hand to the mare's nose. "She loves attention, especially from kind-hearted girls." As Alice carefully stroked the horse, Abigail observed Finn. He wore clean clothes again, his dark hair still damp from washing, and he'd trimmed his beard. The effort he'd made was noticeable but not excessive, just enough to show respect without presumption. "I thought perhaps we could walk down to the meadow by the creek," Finn suggested. "If that's all right with you, Mrs. Winter. The horses could use the exercise, and it's a fine day for it." The meadow was a public area where families often gathered on Sundays, visible from town and perfectly respectable for an afternoon outing. Abigail couldn't find a reason to refuse. "That sounds lovely," she agreed. "Let me just tell Mrs. Hawkins where we'll be." The walk to the meadow was pleasant, with Alice walking beside Willow, occasionally glancing up at the horse with clear admiration. Finn led both horses easily, maintaining a respectful conversation with Abigail about the town, the changing weather, and his work at the Pearson Ranch. "Mr. Pearson's a fair employer," he said. "Expects honest work but treats his men well, better than most I've worked for." "How long do you plan to stay in Silver Creek?" Abigail asked, the question slipping out before she could consider it. Finn glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "I hadn't thought that far ahead when I arrived," he admitted, "but I'm finding reasons to consider putting down roots." The simple statement carried weight that Abigail wasn't ready to examine too closely. At the meadow, Finn showed Alice how Ember could bow, count by pawing the ground, and even appear to shake her head no or nod yes in response to questions. Alice watched with rapt attention, her usual solemn expression occasionally giving way to wonder. "Would you like to sit on Willow?" Finn asked after demonstrating Ember's tricks. "She's very gentle, and I'll hold her the whole time." Alice looked to her mother for permission. Abigail hesitated only briefly before nodding. "If Mr. Blackwood thinks it's safe." With careful hands, Finn lifted Alice onto Willow's back. The girl sat very straight, her small hands gripping the mare's mane, her face a study in concentration. "That's it," Finn encouraged. "You're a natural, Miss Alice, just like your mother." "Mama rides horses?" Alice asked, surprised. "I'd wager she did once upon a time," Finn said, glancing at Abigail. "She has the bearing of someone who knows her way around a saddle." Abigail smiled at his perception. "I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania," she admitted. "We had horses, and I rode every chance I got." "Why don't you ride now, Mama?" Alice asked. The innocent question stirred memories Abigail usually kept safely buried of riding double with Robert during their courtship, of the small mare he'd given her as a wedding gift, sold out of necessity after his death. "We don't have a horse, sweetheart," she said simply, "and they're expensive to keep." Finn watched her face, seeming to read more than she'd said. "Perhaps you'd like to ride Ember for a bit," he offered. "She's spirited but responsive. I think you'd get along well." The temptation was strong. It had been so long since Abigail had felt the freedom of riding, the connection with a horse beneath her. "I'm not dressed for riding," she protested weakly. "Just around the meadow," Finn suggested. "At a walk if you prefer." After a moment's hesitation, Abigail nodded. "All right." "Just a short ride." Finn helped her mount, his hands strong and steady as he boosted her onto Ember's back. The saddle was made for a man, but Abigail found she could sit comfortably enough side saddle. As her hands took the reins, a long, dormant feeling of joy stirred within her. "Go ahead," Finn encouraged, stepping back. "She'll respond to the slightest pressure." Abigail nudged the mare forward, and Ember moved smoothly into a walk. The sensation was both familiar and new, bringing back memories while creating something fresh. She circled the meadow once, then, on impulse, pressed her heels into the horse's sides and urged her into a trot. The increased pace sent her heart racing, not with fear but with exhilaration. She adjusted quickly to the rhythm, rising slightly with each step as she'd been taught as a girl. The wind caught her hair, loosening pins and bringing color to her cheeks. When she returned to where Finn stood with Alice still atop Willow, Abigail was breathless and smiling more freely than she had in years. "You ride beautifully, Mrs. Winter," Finn said, his admiration evident. "Like you were born to it." "Mama, you look happy," Alice observed, her serious eyes studying her mother's flushed face. The simple statement caught Abigail by surprise. Did she look so unhappy normally that her daughter would comment on the difference? The thought was sobering. "It feels good to ride again," she admitted, dismounting with Finn's assistance. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and she found herself not minding. They spent another hour at the meadow, with Finn showing Alice how to offer Willow an apple from her flat palm and teaching her the proper way to stroke a horse's neck. The girl was attentive and careful, following his instructions with unusual focus. As the afternoon waned, they walked back toward town, the horses ambling peacefully beside them. Alice walked between the adults, occasionally reaching up to touch Willow's side as if reassuring herself the horse was still there. "Thank you for today, Mr. Blackwood," Abigail said as they approached the boarding house. "It was most enjoyable." "The pleasure was mine," Finn replied sincerely. "And please call me Finn." The invitation to use his given name represented a shift in their acquaintance, and Abigail found herself nodding. "Then you must call me Abigail." "Abigail," he repeated as if testing the sound of it. "It suits you." Before she could respond, the door to the boarding house opened and Mrs. Hawkins emerged, her expression a mixture of concern and excitement. "Abigail, there you are. A telegram came for you from back east. The boy brought it by an hour ago." Telegrams rarely brought good news, and Abigail felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She took the envelope with trembling fingers and broke the seal. The message was brief but devastating. "Father gravely ill. Come immediately. Margaret." "What is it, Mama?" Alice asked, noticing her mother's distress. Abigail took a steadying breath. "It's from Aunt Margaret. Grandfather is very sick. We need to go to Pennsylvania right away." Alice's face crumpled slightly. She had only met her grandfather once when he'd visited briefly after Robert's death, but they had exchanged letters regularly. "Is he going to die?" she asked directly. "I don't know, sweetheart," Abigail answered honestly, "but we need to go to him." She looked up at Finn, who was watching with concern. "I'm sorry, but we'll have to cut our afternoon short." "Of course," he said immediately. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Abigail started to decline automatically, then reconsidered. The journey east would require quick preparations, and an extra pair of hands would be welcome. "Actually, yes," she decided. "If you wouldn't mind taking the horses back to the Pearson Ranch, I need to speak with Mr. Holloway at the bank about funds for our journey and then see about train tickets." "Consider it done," Finn assured her. "And if you need help with anything else packing, arrangements, please don't hesitate to ask." His steady presence was comforting in the face of sudden upheaval. "Thank you, Finn. I appreciate your kindness." As he prepared to leave with the horses, Finn crouched down to Alice's level. "I'm sorry about your grandfather, Miss Alice. I hope he gets better soon." Alice nodded solemnly. "Thank you for letting me ride Willow." "You're most welcome," Finn replied. "She liked you very much. Perhaps when you return you can ride her again." The promise of a future encounter seemed to comfort Alice, who nodded again, this time with a touch less sadness in her eyes. As Finn led the horses away, Abigail turned to the practical matters at hand. The journey to Pennsylvania would be long and expensive, but there was no question of not going. Her father had been her only remaining family apart from her sister Margaret, and despite their differences over the years, she couldn't ignore his illness. The next morning was a flurry of activity as Abigail packed their trunks and made arrangements for Mrs. Hawkins to oversee the boarding house in her absence. The older woman had readily agreed, waving away Abigail's concerns about the workload. "You just tend to your father," Mrs. Hawkins insisted. "Everything here will be waiting when you return." As Abigail was checking their luggage one final time, a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Finn standing on the porch, his hat in his hands. "I heard you're taking the afternoon train," he said. "I thought you might need help with your trunks." The gesture touched her. "That's very kind of you, Finn. The stagecoach to Denver leaves in an hour, and we do have quite a bit of luggage." He nodded and stepped inside to gather their larger trunk. "Mr. Pearson sends his regards and hopes your father recovers quickly," he said as he worked. "He's given me the afternoon off to help you get on your way." "Please thank him for me," Abigail replied, grateful for the unexpected kindness from her employer. Alice emerged from her room, clutching a small bag that contained her most treasured possessions, including, Abigail noticed, the wooden horse Finn had given her. "Are you ready, sweetheart?" she asked, smoothing her daughter's neatly braided hair. Alice nodded, her expression even more serious than usual. "Is Mr. Finn coming with us?" she asked. "No, darling. Mr. Finn lives here in Silver Creek. He's just helping us with our luggage." Alice considered this, then approached Finn directly. "Will you still be here when we come back?" she asked, her voice small but clear. Finn set down the trunk and gave the question his full attention. "Yes, Miss Alice, I expect I will be," he said solemnly. "I've found good work here and good people too." Something in his words seemed to reassure Alice, who nodded as if confirming a private theory. The journey to the stagecoach station was mercifully short, and Finn efficiently loaded their luggage and spoke briefly with the driver to ensure their trunks would be transferred correctly in Denver for the train east. As the departure time approached, Abigail found herself oddly reluctant to say goodbye. In the short time she'd known Finn, he had become, not quite a friend yet, but something more than an acquaintance. "I can't thank you enough for your help," she said, extending her hand. Finn took it gently, his calloused palm warm against hers. "It was my pleasure, Abigail. I hope your journey is safe and that you find your father in better health than expected." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I'm not certain how long we'll be gone." "However long it takes," Finn said simply. "Silver Creek will be waiting when you return." The way he said it with quiet certainty made it clear he meant he would be waiting as well. As they boarded the stagecoach, Alice looked back at Finn. "Goodbye, Mr. Finn," she called, her small face solemn as ever. "Goodbye for now, Miss Alice," he replied, tipping his hat. "Remember what I said about earning that smile of yours. I haven't forgotten." The coach pulled away, and Abigail watched through the window as Finn's figure grew smaller in the distance. An unexpected ache settled in her chest at the sight, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, the peculiar sadness of leaving something promising behind. The journey east was long and tiring. From Denver, they took the Transcontinental Railroad, changing trains in Chicago for the final leg to Pennsylvania. Throughout the journey, Alice was quiet but watchful, taking in the changing landscape with serious eyes. Occasionally, she would ask a question about her grandfather or their destination, but mostly she kept her own counsel, clutching her small bag with the wooden horse inside. They arrived in Harrisburg on a rainy afternoon to find Margaret waiting at the station. Abigail's sister looked older than her 35 years, with new lines of worry etched around her mouth and eyes. "Thank God you've come," Margaret said, embracing Abigail briefly before bending to kiss Alice's cheek. "Father has been asking for you. How is he?" Abigail asked as they settled into the hired carriage that would take them to their childhood home. Margaret's expression was grave. "The doctor says it's his heart. He could rally, but—" She glanced at Alice and left the sentence unfinished. The old farmhouse looked smaller than Abigail remembered, its white paint faded and peeling in places. As they approached, memories flooded back of her mother gardening in the side yard, of running through the fields with Margaret, of leaving with Robert against her father's wishes. Inside, the house smelled of medicinal tonics and sickness. Margaret led them upstairs to their father's bedroom where George Bennett lay propped against pillows, his once robust frame diminished by illness. "Father," Abigail said softly, approaching the bed, "we're here." The old man's eyes fluttered open, recognition dawning slowly. "Abigail," he whispered, his voice a shadow of its former strength, "and little Alice, you came." "Of course we came," Abigail replied, taking his weathered hand in hers. For the next 2 weeks, they settled into a routine of caring for George, whose condition fluctuated from day to day. Sometimes he was lucid and strong enough to sit up and talk, sharing stories with Alice about Abigail's childhood. Other days, he drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing labored and his mind confused. During one of his better moments, George asked to speak with Abigail alone. Margaret took Alice to pick apples in the old orchard, leaving father and daughter in a rare moment of privacy. "I was wrong about Robert," George said without preamble. "I should have given him my blessing when you married." The unexpected admission brought tears to Abigail's eyes. Her father's opposition to her marriage had created a rift that had never fully healed. "It's in the past now, Father," she said gently. "No, it needs saying." George's voice grew stronger with conviction. "I was a stubborn old fool. I drove you away because I couldn't see past my own plans for your life, and then when he died—" His voice broke. "I should have brought you home then, you and Alice. We've made a good life in Colorado," Abigail assured him. "The boarding house does well and Alice is getting a good education." George studied her face. "But are you happy, Abby? Truly happy?" The question caught her off guard. Was she happy? She was content, certainly. Secure in her independence, proud of her accomplishments. But happy? The word brought to mind her afternoon on horseback with Finn and Alice, the feeling of freedom and possibility that had briefly blossomed. "I'm managing," she answered truthfully. Her father nodded slowly. "You deserve more than managing, child. You always did." He squeezed her hand. "Is there anyone new in your life, a man who might bring back your smile?" The question brought Finn to mind immediately, his steady presence and the gentle way he interacted with Alice. "There's someone I've recently met," she admitted hesitantly. "A cowboy who works at a ranch near town. He's been kind to Alice and me." George's eyes brightened with interest. "Tell me about him." Abigail found herself describing Finn, his quiet competence, his respect for her independence, his patience with Alice. As she spoke, she realized how much she'd noticed about him in their brief acquaintance. "Sounds like a good man," George said when she finished. "Better than most, if he's trying to win over that serious grandchild of mine." "Alice does seem to respond to him," Abigail acknowledged. "More than she has to anyone since Robert died." "Children know," George said with the certainty of age. "They see clearer than we do sometimes." He closed his eyes briefly, fatigue evident in his face. "Promise me something, Abby." "Anything, Father. Don't wait too long to find happiness again. Life's shorter than we think." his eyes, so like her own, fixed on her face. "I wasted years being angry that you chose your own path. Don't waste yours being afraid to choose again." The conversation stayed with Abigail in the days that followed, as her father's condition gradually worsened. One evening, as she sat by his bedside while he slept, Margaret joined her with 2 cups of tea. "He's fading," her sister said quietly. "The doctor doesn't think he'll last the week." Abigail nodded, the reality one she'd been preparing for since their arrival. "At least we had this time with him." Margaret sipped her tea thoughtfully. "He's been different with you this visit, more at peace." "We've said what needed saying," Abigail replied. "After all these years." "He wants you to stay, you know," Margaret said. Afterward. He's left the farm to both of us in his will. We could run it together, you and me and Alice." The offer was tempting in some ways. The farm represented security, a connection to her past, a chance for Alice to know her only remaining family. Yet as Abigail considered it, she realized her heart no longer belonged in Pennsylvania. Her life and potentially her future waited in Silver Creek. "Thank you, Margaret, but our home is in Colorado now," she said gently. "Alice has her school, I have the boarding house, and—" She hesitated, then added, "There are other considerations as well." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Other considerations? You mean a man, don't you?" Abigail felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Perhaps. It's early days yet." Her sister smiled, the expression softening her careworn face. "Father mentioned you'd spoken of someone. A cowboy, he said." "His name is Finn," Abigail said, finding it strange and pleasant to speak his name aloud. "He works at the Pearson Ranch near town." "And Alice likes him?" Margaret asked, knowing how important that would be. "She seems to," Abigail replied. "More than she's liked anyone in a very long time." "Well then," Margaret said, reaching across to squeeze her sister's hand. "Perhaps Colorado is where you belong after all." George Bennett passed away peacefully 3 days later, with both his daughters and his granddaughter at his bedside. The funeral was well attended by neighbors and old friends, many of whom remembered Abigail from her youth and cooed over Alice, remarking on her resemblance to her mother. In the quiet days that followed, as they settled the estate and prepared for their return journey, Abigail found herself thinking often of Silver Creek and of Finn. She wondered if he still rode Ember to town on Saturdays, if he thought of their afternoon at the meadow, if he truly would be waiting when they returned. Alice, too, seemed increasingly eager to go home. One evening, as Abigail was packing their trunks, she found her daughter sitting on the window seat, holding the wooden horse and looking westward. "Are you ready to go home, sweetheart?" Abigail asked, joining her. Alice nodded. "I miss our house and school." After a pause, she added, "And Mr. Finn." The simple addition warmed Abigail's heart. "I think he misses you too." Alice turned the wooden horse in her hands. "Do you think he really meant it, about earning my smile every day?" "I believe he did," Abigail replied. "Finn seems like a man who means what he says." Alice considered this with her usual seriousness. "I almost smiled when he let me ride Willow," she admitted, "but I wasn't sure if I should." The confession surprised Abigail. "Why weren't you sure, sweetheart?" Alice's small fingers traced the wooden horse's mane. "Because Daddy's not here to see it, and it felt like I was forgetting him." The innocent admission broke Abigail's heart. She gathered Alice into her arms, holding her close. "Oh, my darling girl," she whispered. "Your daddy would want you to smile, he would want you to be happy. Smiling doesn't mean you've forgotten him, it means you're living the way he would want you to." Alice buried her face against her mother's shoulder. "Do you think so? Really?" "I know so," Abigail assured her. "Your father loved your smile more than anything in the world. He used to say it was like sunshine after rain." Alice pulled back slightly, her solemn eyes searching her mother's face. You don't smile much either, Mama. The observation, so simply stated, struck Abigail deeply. Had she been teaching her daughter by example to hold her joy inside? To guard against happiness as if it were a betrayal of Robert's memory? You're right, she acknowledged. I haven't smiled enough, but perhaps we both can learn to smile more together. Their journey back to Colorado seemed swifter than the eastward trip had been, perhaps because they were traveling towards something rather than away. As the landscape changed from the green hills of the east to the vast plains, and finally the rugged mountains of Colorado, Abigail felt a growing sense of anticipation. They arrived in Silver Creek on a crisp autumn morning. Mrs. Hawkins was waiting at the boarding house with a warm welcome and a flurry of local news. Abigail listened with half an ear, her thoughts elsewhere. "And that nice Mr. Blackwood asked about you twice," Mrs. Hawkins mentioned, her eyes twinkling. "Very concerned about your father he was. Asked when you might be returning." Abigail tried not to appear too interested. "Did he? That was thoughtful of him." "Hum," Mrs. Hawkins nodded, clearly not fooled. "He's been promoted to foreman at the Pearson place, you know. Old Sam Jenkins finally retired. Town's talking about how Mr. Blackwood might be looking to buy property of his own soon." The news was surprising. In the weeks they'd been gone, Finn had apparently established himself firmly in the community. The thought both pleased and unsettled Abigail. What if he had moved on from whatever interest he'd shown in her and Alice? She didn't have long to wonder. The following day, as she was reopening the boarding house accounts at the bank, she turned to find Finn standing in the doorway, hat in hand. "Welcome back," he said simply, his eyes taking in her face as if checking that she was truly there. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance. "We only arrived yesterday." "I heard." He stepped further into the bank. "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you." It was peaceful at the end. She gathered her courage and added, "He and I had a chance to make our peace, which I'm grateful for." Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's a blessing." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, the weeks of separation creating an uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "I heard you've been promoted," Abigail said finally. "Congratulations." "Thank you. It's a good position." He cleared his throat. "I've saved most of my wages. Thinking of buying a small place of my own come spring." The news confirmed Mrs. Hawkins' gossip. "That's wonderful," Abigail said sincerely. "You're putting down roots in Silver Creek, then." "That's my intention." His gaze was steady on hers. "If there's reason enough to stay." The simple statement carried a weight of meaning that made Abigail's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, the bank manager approached with papers for her to sign, and the moment passed. "I should let you finish your business," Finn said, stepping back. "But I was wondering if perhaps you and Alice might join me for a ride on Sunday afternoon. Willow has missed her, I think." The invitation brought a smile to Abigail's face. "I think Alice would like that very much. She spoke of Willow often during our journey." 2:00 then. "I could bring a picnic if the weather holds." "That sounds lovely," Abigail agreed. As she watched him leave, a sense of possibility unfurled within her, fragile but hopeful. When Sunday arrived, Abigail found herself choosing her dress with unusual care and helping Alice brush her hair until it shone. The girl seemed more animated than usual, asking several times if it was time to go yet. "Is it time, Mama? You said 2:00. "Almost, sweetheart," Abigail assured her, amused by her daughter's rare impatience. "We don't want to be late, but we don't want to appear too eager either." At precisely 2:00, Finn arrived with Ember and Willow. He'd added a third horse as well as sturdy bay gelding saddled for Abigail. "This is Thunder," he explained as they greeted the horses. He belongs to Mr. Pearson, but he's agreed to lend him to us for the afternoon." Alice approached Willow cautiously, then with growing confidence as the mare nickered in apparent recognition. "She remembers me," she said with wonder. "Of course she does," Finn replied, crouching beside her. "Horses never forget a kind hand or a gentle voice." He helped Alice mount, showing her how to hold the reins properly, then assisted Abigail onto Thunder's back. The bay was steady and responsive, and Abigail felt the familiar joy of being on horseback return immediately. They rode to a different meadow this time, one farther from town but more scenic, with a small stream running through it and cottonwood trees providing dappled shade. Finn had indeed brought a picnic, packed carefully in saddlebags fried chicken, biscuits, apples, and even a small jar of honey. As they spread the blanket under a tree, Abigail noticed the care he'd taken with every detail. The food was simple but perfectly prepared, the blanket clean and without holes, the location private but not inappropriately so. "This is wonderful, Finn," she said as they settled to eat. "Thank you for arranging it." "My pleasure," he replied, his smile reaching his eyes. "It's good to have you both back in Silver Creek." They ate companionably, with Finn asking Alice about her journey and listening attentively to her descriptions of the train, her grandfather's farm, and the apple orchard. The girl was more talkative than Abigail had seen her in ages, though her expression remained serious. After they finished eating, Finn produced a surprise from his saddlebag, a small wooden box he'd carved himself. "I made this while you were away," he told Alice, presenting it to her. "For your horse collection." Alice opened the box carefully to reveal several more carved horses inside, each unique in pose and detail. Her eyes widened with delight as she examined each one. "They're beautiful," she whispered, handling them reverently. "Thank you, Mr. Finn." "You're very welcome, Miss Alice," he replied solemnly. "I thought Star might need some companions." As Alice arranged the horses on the blanket, Finn turned to Abigail. "I made something for you as well," he said, his voice low enough that Alice wouldn't hear. "Though it's not as well crafted, I'm afraid." From his pocket, he withdrew a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper. Abigail opened it curiously to find a pressed wildflower preserved between two pieces of glass, bound together with copper wire. The flower was a mountain columbine, Colorado's state flower, its delicate blue petals perfectly preserved. "It's lovely," she said, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gift. "Did you make this yourself?" Finn nodded, a hint of self-consciousness in his expression. "My mother taught all her children how to press flowers, said beauty should be preserved when possible." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Abigail said, carefully placing the gift in her own pocket. "Thank you, Finn. I'll treasure it." They spent the afternoon by the stream, with Finn showing Alice how to skip stones across the water, and teaching her the names of birds that darted among the trees. Abigail watched them together, noting the patience with which he answered every question, and the respectful way he treated her daughter's serious nature. As the sun began to lower in the sky, they packed up their picnic and prepared to ride back to town. Before mounting, Finn pulled Abigail aside, his expression earnest. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said quietly. "I understand if it's too soon, but—" "Yes," Abigail prompted when he hesitated. "Would you allow me to call on you properly, not just for outings with Alice, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'd like to court you, Abigail, if you're amenable." The formal request, so traditional and respectful, touched her deeply. "I would like that very much," she replied, her heart quickening at the smile that spread across his face. "Thank you," he said simply. "You've made me a very happy man." As they rode back to town, with Alice securely mounted on Willow between them, Abigail felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The journey east had given her closure with her father and clarity about her future. Now, riding beside Finn with the setting sun painting the mountains gold, she allowed herself to imagine possibilities she had long since set aside. Over the following weeks, Finn became a regular visitor at the boarding house. He would come for Sunday suppers, sometimes bringing small gifts, a book for Alice, fresh flowers for Abigail, occasionally game he had hunted that she would prepare for their meal. They established a comfortable routine, with conversation flowing easily between them. Mrs. Hawkins watched their developing relationship with undisguised approval, often finding excuses to leave them alone in the parlor after dinner, while she entertained Alice with stories or games in the kitchen. One crisp November evening, as they sat by the fire after Alice had gone to bed, Finn turned to Abigail with an unusually serious expression. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. "About my past." Abigail set aside her mending, giving him her full attention. "What is it?" Finn stared into the fire, his profile strong in the flickering light. "I told you I'd been wandering for years, but I didn't tell you why." He took a deep breath. "I was married once in Texas. Her name was Sarah. We had a son." The revelation surprised Abigail, though she kept her expression neutral, waiting for him to continue. "There was a fever that swept through our town," Finn went on, his voice steady but pained. "It took them both within days of each other. Our boy was only 4. "Oh, Finn," Abigail whispered, reaching for his hand. "I'm so sorry." He clasped her fingers tightly. "It was 12 years ago now. After they died, I couldn't bear to stay in that house in that town, so I started drifting. Never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots, never allowing myself to care too deeply for anyone or anything. Until now," Abigail asked softly. Finn turned to look at her directly. "Until Silver Creek. Until you and Alice." He squeezed her hand. "I need you to know that I understand loss, Abigail. I understand what it means to build a life again afterward. And I respect what you've built here, your independence, your strength in raising Alice alone." His honesty moved her deeply. "Thank you for telling me," she said, "and for understanding. I wanted you to know why I'm so certain about staying here, about my feelings for you." His eyes held hers steadily. "I've wandered long enough to recognize home when I find it." The simple declaration brought tears to Abigail's eyes. In that moment, she knew with certainty that she was falling in love with this quiet, steadfast man. "Alice adores you," she said after a moment. "I've never seen her respond to anyone the way she does to you." "She's an extraordinary child," Finn replied. "So thoughtful, so observant. She reminds me a little of my son. He was serious too, always thinking deeply about things." The comparison touched Abigail's heart. "I wish I could have known him. And Sarah." "Sarah would have liked you," Finn said with gentle certainty. "She valued honesty and courage above all else. You have both in abundance." They sat in companionable silence for a while, hands still joined, each contemplating the paths that had led them to this moment. "Will you tell me about Robert?" Finn asked eventually. "If you're comfortable doing so." Abigail found that she was. She told him about meeting Robert at a church social, about his dreams of finding silver in Colorado, about their journey west against her father's wishes, and about the devoted father he had been to Alice in her early years. "He sounds like a good man," Finn said when she finished. "A man worth grieving." "He was," Abigail agreed. "But I think it's time to do more than grieve now, for both Alice and me." Winter settled over Silver Creek with a blanket of snow that transformed the town into a scene from a Christmas card. The boarding house was festively decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, and Abigail found herself looking forward to the holidays for the first time in years. Finn continued his courtship with steady devotion, undeterred by the cold weather. He arranged for sleigh rides, brought Christmas presents for both Abigail and Alice, and became a welcome fixture at the boarding house's holiday celebrations. On Christmas Eve, after a festive dinner with the boarders, Finn asked if he might speak with Alice privately. Curious but trusting, Abigail agreed, watching from the doorway as Finn led her daughter to the parlor and sat beside her on the sofa. "Miss Alice," he began seriously, "I wanted to ask your permission for something important." Alice regarded him with her customary solemnity. "What is it, Mr. Finn?" "I love your mother very much," he said simply, "and I care deeply for you as well. I'd like to ask your mother to marry me, but I wanted to make sure you would be comfortable with that first." Alice considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Would you live here with us?" she asked. "Actually, I've purchased a small ranch just outside town," Finn explained. "It's not large, but it has a nice house with plenty of room for all of us and enough land for horses, including Willow, who would be yours." Alice's eyes widened at this. "My own horse? Really?" "Really," Finn confirmed. "But only if you and your mother want that. I would never want to change things in a way that made either of you unhappy." Alice was quiet for a long moment, her small face serious as she considered. "My papa is in heaven," she finally said. "He can't come back." "That's right," Finn agreed gently. "And no one could ever replace him in your heart. I wouldn't try to do that. But you could be something else," Alice continued, working out her thoughts. "Not a new papa, but perhaps a friend," Finn suggested. "Someone who cares about you and your mother and wants to help take care of you both." Alice nodded, apparently satisfied with this definition. "I think Mama smiles more when you're here," she observed. "And I like the horses." Finn smiled at this practical assessment. "So do I have your permission to ask your mother?" After one final moment of consideration, Alice nodded. "Yes, but you have to keep your promise." "What promise is that?" "About earning my smile every day," she reminded him solemnly. Finn's expression softened. "That's a promise I intend to keep for as long as I live, Miss Alice." On Christmas morning, after Alice had opened her presents, including a new winter coat from Abigail and a beautifully illustrated book of horse stories from Finn asked Abigail to join him for a short walk in the fresh snow. They strolled arm in arm down the quiet street, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. When they reached the small church at the end of the road, Finn stopped and turned to face her. "I spoke with Alice last night," he began, his expression a mixture of nervousness and hope. "I asked for her permission to marry you." Abigail's heart skipped a beat. "You did?" Finn nodded. "She gave her approval after making sure I remembered my promise to earn her smile every day." Tears pricked at Abigail's eyes, both at the thoughtfulness of consulting Alice first and at the memory of his first words to her daughter all those months ago. "Abigail Winter," Finn continued, taking both her hands in his. "I know we haven't known each other long in the counting of months, but I believe some souls recognize each other quickly. I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your devotion to Alice. I love the way you ride a horse like you were born to it, the way you manage your boarding house with grace, the way you've built a life on your own terms." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple but elegant ring with a single pearl set in gold. "I'm not a wealthy man," he said, "but I've purchased a small ranch outside town, and I promise to work every day to give you and Alice a good life there. Will you marry me, Abigail? Will you and Alice make a home with me?" Abigail looked at the ring, then at the man holding it, this steady, kind man who had walked through his own valley of grief and emerged with his capacity to love intact. A man who saw her daughter's serious nature not as something to be fixed, but as something to be cherished. A man who had waited patiently for her to be ready, never pushing, always respecting her independence. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Finn, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, snow began to fall gently around them, the soft flakes catching in her hair and on his shoulders. Finn drew her close and kissed her, a kiss that held promise and passion and the certainty of a future together. When they returned to the boarding house, Alice was waiting by the window. Seeing them approach hand in hand, she ran to the door. "Did you say yes, Mama?" she asked, her eyes darting from her mother's face to her hand where the pearl ring now rested. "I did, sweetheart," Abigail confirmed. "How do you feel about that?" Alice considered the question with her usual seriousness. "I think it's good," she decided. "Mr. Finn said I can have Willow for my very own horse." Abigail laughed, the sound bright in the Christmas morning. "Is that the only reason you approve?" Alice shook her head. "No, he makes you happy, and he tells good stories, and he doesn't mind that I don't smile much." Finn crouched down to Alice's level. "Actually, Miss Alice, I mind very much, not because I think there's anything wrong with being serious, but because I believe there's joy waiting inside you. And I meant what I said about earning your smile every day. It's a challenge I take very seriously." Something in his words or expression must have reached her, because for the first time since they'd known him, for the first time in years, perhaps Alice's solemn face broke into a small but unmistakable smile. The sight was so unexpected, so beautiful, that Abigail felt tears spring to her eyes. Finn looked equally moved, his expression one of wonder as Alice's smile widened just a fraction more. "Well," he said softly, "if I'd known all it would take was proposing to your mother, I might have done it months ago." Alice's smile faded back to her usual serious expression, but something had changed. A door had opened, a possibility revealed. "You earned it," she said simply, then turned and went back inside, leaving the adults to follow in amazed silence. They were married in the spring, when the meadows around Silver Creek were carpeted with wildflowers. It was a simple ceremony in the town church, attended by friends and neighbors who had watched their courtship with approval and interest. Alice, dressed in a new blue dress that matched her eyes, stood beside her mother throughout the ceremony, her face serious but relaxed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Finn leaned down to kiss his bride, Alice's small hand slipped into his free one, a gesture of acceptance that meant as much to him as the gold band now encircling his finger. Their new home was indeed modest, but comfortable, a sturdy two-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by enough land for a small herd of cattle and several horses, including Willow, who was officially presented to Alice on the day they moved in. Life settled into new patterns as spring gave way to summer. Finn worked the ranch with the help of 2 hired hands, while Abigail maintained a garden and kept the house, occasionally taking in mending or baking for extra income. Alice attended school in town, riding Willow back and forth each day under Finn's watchful eye. The smiles came more frequently for Alice as the months passed, not often, and usually not for long, but genuine moments of joy that Abigail treasured. They appeared when Finn taught her to rope a calf, when a litter of kittens was born in the barn, when she successfully jumped Willow over a small stream for the first time. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Finn cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, glancing at Abigail beside him. "The house seems awful big for just the 3 of us." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "Does it?" "I thought it was just right." "Well," Finn continued, a smile playing at his lips, I was thinking it might be nice to fill it up a bit more, maybe with the patter of little feet." A warmth spread through Abigail's chest at his words. They had discussed children before their marriage, both agreeing they would welcome them if they were blessed that way, but they hadn't spoken of it since. "Are you asking if I want more children, Finn Blackwood?" she teased. "I suppose I am," he replied, taking her hand. "What do you think, Mrs. Blackwood? Shall we give Alice a brother or sister to boss around?" The idea filled her with unexpected joy. At 32, she was still young enough to bear more children safely, and the thought of a baby Finn's baby made her heart swell. "I think that sounds wonderful," she said softly. Finn's face broke into a wide smile. "Really? You're sure?" "I'm sure," she confirmed, leaning over to kiss him. "Though we should probably consult Alice. She might have an opinion on the matter." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Alice appeared in the doorway. "Mama, is there more pie?" she asked, then paused, noticing their clasped hands and intimate posture. "Are you talking about grown-up things?" Finn chuckled. "Sort of. Actually, we were talking about something that concerns you too. Come sit with us." Alice settled on the step at their feet, looking up expectantly. "Your mother and I were discussing the possibility of having a baby," Finn explained straightforwardly. "How would you feel about having a little brother or sister?" Alice considered this with her characteristic thoroughness. "Would the baby live here with us?" she asked. "Of course," Abigail answered, amused by the practical question. "And would you still have time to teach me to ride and rope?" she asked Finn. "Absolutely," he assured her. "Being a big sister would be an important job, but it wouldn't change the important things we do together." Alice nodded, apparently satisfied. "I think I would like a sister," she decided. "Brothers are too noisy. Sarah Jenkins has one, and he pulls her hair." Finn struggled to maintain a serious expression. "Well, we can't exactly choose whether it's a brother or sister, but we'll keep your preference in mind." "When would the baby come?" Alice asked. Abigail exchanged a glance with Finn. "We don't know yet, sweetheart. First we have to see if God blesses us with a baby. It might take some time, or it might not happen at all." Alice nodded again, processing this information. "I hope it does," she said finally. "I think you'd be a good papa, Mr. Finn." The simple statement, delivered in Alice's matter-of-fact way, brought tears to Finn's eyes. It was the first time she had used that word for him, and though they had never pressed her to do so, the spontaneous acknowledgement meant the world to him. "Thank you, Alice," he said, his voice slightly rough. "That means a great deal to me." She looked up at him, and there it was again, that rare, precious smile, small but genuine, lighting up her solemn face for a perfect moment before disappearing like a firefly's glow. Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Abigail wrapped her arms around Finn from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. "She called you Papa," she said softly. Finn turned in her embrace, his eyes still holding wonder at the memory. "She did. I never expected." He shook his head. "I never wanted to replace Robert in her heart." "You haven't," Abigail assured him. "You've just created your own place there, a different place, but just as real." Finn cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Abigail Blackwood. I love the family we are and the family we might become." As winter approached once more, Abigail's suspicions were confirmed by the town doctor. They were expecting a child, due in late spring. The news was met with joy by Finn and thoughtful anticipation by Alice, who immediately began planning where the baby would sleep and what she would teach her new sister. She remained convinced it would be a girl. Christmas that year was especially festive, with the house decorated more elaborately than Abigail would have thought possible. Finn seemed determined to make the holiday memorable, bringing in the largest pine tree that would fit in their parlor and spending evenings carving ornaments while Abigail sewed tiny garments for the coming baby. On Christmas Eve, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Alice approached Finn with unusual hesitation. "Mr. Finn," she said, standing before him with her hands behind her back. "I made something for you." "Did you now?" he replied, setting aside the book he'd been reading. "I'm honored." Alice brought her hands forward, revealing a small, clumsily wrapped package. "It's not as nice as the horses you made for me," she warned as she handed it to him. Finn unwrapped it carefully to reveal a handkerchief that Alice had clearly embroidered herself. In one corner, in uneven but recognizable stitches, she had sewn a horse and the word "Papa." For a moment, Finn couldn't speak. He stared at the simple gift, running his thumb over the stitches that must have taken hours of patient work from her small hands. "Alice," he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion, "this is the finest gift I've ever received." "Miss Taylor helped me with the stitches," she admitted, "but I drew the horse myself." "It's perfect," Finn assured her, opening his arms. "May I hug you, Alice?" She nodded and stepped into his embrace, allowing him to hold her close for a long moment. When she pulled back, her face held that rare, precious smile, wider this time, more certain. "Merry Christmas, Papa," she said softly. The months that followed were filled with preparations for the baby and the spring planting. Finn expanded the cattle herd slightly, hired another hand to help with the increased workload, and built a cradle for the coming child, carving horses and stars into the headboard. Abigail watched her husband's excitement with amusement and love. For a man who had lost so much, his capacity for joy remained remarkably intact. He approached each day with the same steady dedication he had shown since she first met him, working hard, loving deeply, and, true to his word, continuing to earn Alice's smile every day. Those smiles came more frequently now when he taught her to braid leather into a bridle, when he built a small corral just for her to practice riding, when he carried her inside after she fell asleep reading in the barn loft. The serious child remained thoughtful and quiet by nature, but joy had found its way back into her life, one earned smile at a time. In late May, after a difficult but ultimately successful labor, Abigail gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, both healthy and strong-lunged. They named the boy Robert, in honor of Alice's father, and the girl Sarah, after Finn's first wife, a tribute to the past that had shaped them and the future they now embraced together. Alice approached her new siblings with cautious wonder, especially surprised by the presence of a brother she hadn't anticipated. "He's not as noisy as Sarah Jenkins' brother," she observed with relief after the first few days, "and he has Papa's eyes." The simple observation, and the easy way she now used the word Papa for Finn, brought smiles to both parents' faces. As summer bloomed around their ranch, life settled into new rhythms dictated by the needs of two infants and the ongoing work of the land. Mornings began early, with Finn often taking Alice out for a ride before the day grew too hot, returning to find Abigail on the porch with the twins, enjoying the mountain air. One such morning, as Abigail watched her husband and daughter returning from their ride, Alice's laughter still a rare and precious sound floating across the yard, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The grief that had once defined their lives hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed, becoming part of a larger tapestry that now included new joy, new love, new beginnings. As Finn lifted Alice down from Willow's back, the girl threw her arms around his neck in an impulsive hug. Her face, turned toward where Abigail sat with the twins, bore a smile as bright and beautiful as the Colorado sunrise. Finn joined Abigail on the porch, settling beside her with a contented sigh. "She jumped the creek today," he reported proudly, "all on her own." "I saw that smile," Abigail said, leaning against his shoulder. You've kept your promise to her." Finn looked out over their land to where Alice was now leading Willow toward the barn, still smiling to herself. "It was never a hardship," he said softly. Loving both of you has been the easiest promise I've ever kept." As if sensing the moment, baby Sarah chose that instant to wake, her small cries quickly joined by her brothers. Finn laughed and reached for Robert while Abigail cradled Sarah. "A full house," he observed, settling his son against his shoulder. "Just as we hoped." "A full house," Abigail agreed. Looking around at the family they had built together, not in spite of their losses but because of them. Because grief had taught them the value of love and the courage to risk their hearts again. And from the barn, Alice's voice drifted back to them, singing a song Finn had taught her, further proof that the solemn child who had never smiled at a man, until a steady cowboy promised to earn that smile every day, had found her joy at last.